WWE pay-per-views are a key mark on the calendar for all wrestling fans, with storylines usually concluding or beginning and memorable moments with classic matchups to go with. However, with many people paying for these premium live events, they would expect top-notch booking every single time. Sadly, this isn't always the case, as fans on numerous occasions have been left feeling heartbroken, cheated or scammed. With this, join us as we take an in-depth look and count down the 10 worst pay-per-view endings in WWE history. Number 10. King of the Ring 1999. In the height of the Attitude Era, most pay-per-views would end on a high note, with Stone Cold Steve Austin usually getting the last laugh, sending the fans home happy. However, on this night, the opposite would unfold. Austin would face off against McMahon's in a 2-on-1 handicap ladder match for full control over the WWE. The match featured some fun spots, and Austin was able to dominate most of the match, yet as he went to climb the ladder to secure the briefcase, it would be mysteriously raised out of his reach. The McMahons would capitalise on this and manage to secure the win when the briefcase was lowered back down by a mysterious accomplice. The worst part of all of this is that we never got to find out who was behind the controls, as the WWE just decided to skip over that part of the story, leaving fans confused. Years later, it has been said that the Big Boss Man was meant to be the mystery man behind the controls. However, it's over 20 years too late now. Number 9. The Great American Bash 2004. After The Undertaker had returned at WrestleMania 20 to face his brother Kane, he also re-debuted the Deadman gimmick. After this, his main foe would go on to be Paul Heyman over on the SmackDown brand. Heyman would use the Dudley Boys to try and dispose of The Undertaker, even going as far as to kidnap The Undertaker's manager Paul Bearer. As the Great American Bash 2004 pay-per-view rolled around, The Undertaker would be forced to face the Dudleys in a handicapped concrete crypt match, where Paul Bearer was locked inside the crypt, ready to be filled with cement, and Heyman threatening to pull the trigger if The Undertaker didn't lay down for the Dudleys. The defiant Undertaker would go on to win the match and manage to stop Heyman with a lightning bolt from the sky, yet in an even more bizarre turn of events, the Deadman would pull the switch himself, burying his own manager and father inside the concrete crypt with no real reason or explanation given. Number 8. Cyber Sunday 2006. The Cyber Sunday pay-per-view emerged with the growth of the internet in the early 2000s and would probably be more fitting for today's standards with how popular social media is. The theme of the show would allow fans to vote on match stipulations, opponents, and various other elements of the show. In the main event of the show, fans would vote for King Booker to defend his World Heavyweight title against fellow champions John Cena and The Big Show in a triple threat match. However, around this time, Kevin Federline, the ex-husband of Britney Spears, had been featured in a short storyline with Cena. As the match drew to a close, Federline would rush down to the ring and blast Cena with the title belt, costing him the win. Fans were disinterested in seeing Federline altogether, never mind having him interrupt a pay-per-view main event, in one of the most disappointing pay-per-view endings in WWE history. Number 7. Hell in a Cell 2014. The blood feud between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose fittingly entered Hell in a Cell for the main event of the 2014 pay-per-view, although the ending would ultimately ruin what was by far the most solid bout on this show. This was both Ambrose and Rollins' first singles pay-per-view event and should have been remembered more fondly. The pair would wage war all around the cell, including a huge double bump through the announce tables. Yet with the finish in sight, it looked like Dean Ambrose was finally about to get his revenge for Seth turning on the Shield. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, the lights would cut out and a hologram of Bray Wyatt would appear in the ring, before he would burst through a plume of smoke to attack Ambrose, allowing Rollins to pick up the win. After such a long and intense blood feud between the two former Shield members, the last thing fans wanted to see was a bizarre looking Bray Wyatt hologram to help conclude the story. Number 6. Royal Rumble 2015. During the peak of Roman Reigns' babyface push, fans were infuriated at how the WWE let Roman Reigns run through everyone, whilst ignoring their fan favourites such as CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. At the Royal Rumble 2015 pay-per-view, this was meant to be the night that Roman Reigns ushered his way into the main event picture, earning a WWE title shot against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 31. Instead, fans turned against him, especially after the elimination of Daniel Bryan during the Rumble match, arguably one of the most hostile reactions in WWE history, with even The Rock making a surprise appearance towards the end to help Reigns, which was met by massive boos from the crowd. You know something for sure isn't right when even the People's Champ gets booed. Number 5. SummerSlam 1993. Throughout 1993, Lex Luger had received a massive push within the WWE, especially when entering a feud with WWE Champion Yokozuna. The character of the muscle-bound, patriotic babyface was very similar to Hulk Hogan, as Vince McMahon wanted Luger as the new face of the company moving forward. As the main event of SummerSlam 1993 rolled around, the pair would face off, and Yokozuna would end up getting counted out to retain the championship in what was a huge disappointment to fans. The ending was even more awkward though, as the baby faces of the locker room would come out to place Luger on their shoulders as balloons rained down, even though Luger hadn't even won the title. Number 4. Battleground 2013. Daniel Bryan's rise to the top of the WWE ended in the best way possible, although on the road to WrestleMania 30 there were plenty of terrible moments to go with it. Bryan would be locked into a feud with the Viper Randy Orton, but would continue losing title shots to Orton for the WWE World Championship in multiple shady finishes. As the two men would face off in the main event of the Battleground 2013 pay-per-view, the end of the match would turn into a disaster, as it featured the Big Show being threatened with his job by Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, as the Big Show would then follow their orders by interfering in the main event and knocking out Bryan, but he also knocked out Orton. Fans were left confused and annoyed as the show ended underwhelmingly without a finish as a no contest. Number 3. WrestleMania 9, 1993. Fans were starting to grow tired of Hulkamania in 1993, with nearly a decade of the Hulkster running wild at WrestleMania. As WrestleMania 9 rolled around, the placement of Hogan in a tag team match, teaming with Brutus Beefcake against Money Inc., felt like the right spot for him, until he appeared again later on in the show. The main event would feature Yokozuna defeating Bret Hart to retain the WWE Championship, all until Hogan would appear out of nowhere to challenge Yokozuna for the title. As a reluctant Bret Hart waved him on, the show ended with Hogan winning the title, despite never earning the title shot. Hogan would lose it back to Yokozuna and left the company months later for WCW. Bret Hart still rants about the annoyance of such a finish at the time to this day. Number 2. Hell in a Cell 2019. This night will live on forever as one of the worst booking decisions the WWE have ever made. Fans loved the first Cell match of the night between Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch, but WWE seemed to have gone with the wrong main event of Seth Rollins vs The Fiend Bray Wyatt, as it ended in a complete disappointment. The problem with Wyatt's Fiend character is that he is immune to pain, with Rollins using everything he could to keep the Fiend down during the match. Chairs, ladders and toolboxes weren't enough, and if things weren't bad enough already with the poor red lighting and bright red cage, the ref would call off the bout altogether after Seth hit the Fiend with a sledgehammer whilst buried underneath various other weapons. Fans would become furious at this, as not only is the Hell in a Cell known for its violence, but the referee calling off for the finish was ridiculous. Fans booed heavily and would begin to chant AEW in response to the lack of a finish in a generally atrocious ending. Rollins would also be furious with Vince McMahon backstage after warning him that the finish would cause the fans to uproar. And to make things even worse, The Fiend would defeat Rollins a month later in Saudi Arabia to capture the belt, something that could have been done on this night instead. Number 1. Over the Limit 2012. WWE once chose to give John Cena vs John Laurinaitis the main event spot in a pay-per-view over a classic WWE Championship match between CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. That would be enough to give the Over the Limit 2012 pay-per-view the worst spot on this list, but that wasn't even the most depressing aspect of the main event. Johnny Ace was no longer a wrestler, which meant that Cena destroyed him for most of the match in a lackluster finish. With little competitiveness in the bout, the Big Show would make a surprise appearance, knocking out Cena to help Laurinaitis steal the win and remain in power of Raw. Fans at the show and online were not one bit impressed and would heavily complain about having to pay and witness one of the worst main events and endings in WWE history. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more wrestling content.